We're going to make this so interesting.
Yeah. Thank you for coming out to the Future of Asheville panel at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning when I guess all the good people are at church. What we want to discuss today is excuse me.
What does that say about us, Dallas?
Oh, well, that too. We're all good people. There's not any bad people here. What we want to get started and talk about today is the future of Asheville and the jobs that could potentially be available here. Some of the experiences that we've had over the last few years of the changing economy and what that sort of looks like in Asheville and how we maintain some of the values here, so that we're not, so that we still have friends at the end of the day when we're conducting business and things like that nature. So I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. I'm only the organizer here, and I'll participate, but I want to first introduction to Kora Manheimer, the sister of our mayor and adjunct professor here, and we'll let her take it and we'll move on down the line here.
Sure, I'll give a little bit more background. I have a BFA and an MFA in photography, which, as you know, is a super high-paying field that clearly I'm incredibly successful in. Not for financially. So I've been working in the internet and tech industry for the last 17 or 18 years. I worked at Apple and Google and a bunch of interactive ad agencies, and just moved back to Asheville last year. And I teach in the new media department here at UNCA. I'm an adjunct. I teach digital design principles, which is basically like Illustrator, Photoshop, etc. And my background and current, present background.
Well, my name is Heather Seltzer. I guess the fastest way to say what my past and present is I'm just a natural community organizer. In the tech industry, or where I find my most local advocacy work, is in open data, open transparency. I'm the community organizer with Code for Asheville, where we're working with the city and coders and hackers to, on a grassroots level, make the city better. And that does come with opportunities for new industry, as it's happening actually around the world. With new data becomes new opportunities both in the nonprofit and the for-profit realm. So glad to be here.
Good morning. My name is Kate Pett, and I'm the director of the Asheville City Schools Foundation. And Dallas invited me here because we got connected in the fall. The Asheville City Schools Foundation is interested in investing in technology to help reform public education, to try and help prepare kids in our community and in this region of Western North Carolina for the future. I've worked in public education reform for about 25 years. I actually started as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa and was so impressed by the ability for education to really reshape communities that I sort of left the life of international travel to come back and work in public education in the United States. And since then have been really interested in how we can really use education as a community hub to really help shape and form our communities going forward. And in the last 10 years, I've been really interested in how technology will play a role in either helping us close the divide between our sort of privileged and less privileged students, or really increase that divide. And so that's one of the things that I'm interested in talking with people about, is how we can ensure that we bridge this digital divide that's really developing between our privileged and less privileged students.
Great. So one thing that I wanted to talk about was how we could start looking at some of these things with the Code for Asheville, and how the data is going to be there in the future, and how it's a growing thing, and how we're going to be able to use it to create games and different sort of more fun and entertaining aspects of it, and as well as the improvements that come along with it. what have you seen, Heather, with Code for Asheville? Like, as far as, like, could you talk about some of your hackathons?
Absolutely. If you're not familiar with the hacker movement, especially when it comes to changing locally or internationally, basically we are taking public assets, which is our data as technology has moved forward, so as our rights as a democracy to have access to it. And so let's say we're trying to tackle transportation, which was our last hackathon here locally. You have different people from different walks of life in Asheville. You have the advocates who are fighting for bicycles. You have people who are concerned about kids getting home after school safely. If you know anything about Asheville, it's a difficult thing. Then you suddenly have all these brains in a room, and they're just going to go for it, and they have data all over the place. Everything from GIS, sidewalks, to accident reports from the North Carolina DOT. Now, what happens when you have this collaboration between data geeks and designers and hackers is something that is always a surprise and always highly innovative. Now, that's coming from the please build a sidewalk, Heather. When it comes to it being beyond what I can even come up with is probably the most exciting thing about data. I was just telling Dallas USA Today came out with a great article a couple days ago about the hacker movement and how in Arizona, this startup got $50,000 just from this hackathon because they are like, we've released all this data. Hello world, please do what you can with it. And yes, it can be everything from, my favorite was over at Runcie, where NASA has done open data, and so you have the universe and all these zeros and ones, and you get a good visual, or you put it in the hands of someone, or make it accessible to the 5-year-old, like they did over at Runcie, where you could fly through the universe. You start a new dialogue. So what makes things cool is it's the tools you use it with, and it's really amazing that we're on the beginning of a movement, and it's as simple and what used to be as boring as data. So.
Yeah. And we had an Oculus Rift set up in our room, and that was one of my thoughts, was that if we could send out things out into the universe to send us back its data, with the Oculus Rift, we'll be able to travel through anywhere in the universe that we want to travel without all of the fuel and all the space travel.
SpaceX.
It doesn't sound like it's comfortable. One thing, when we were discussing this panel, one thing that came up that Kora mentioned was individualism and independence, I guess, and how people want to sort of remain individuals in Asheville, and if that makes sense, and how we're artistic and that. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for technology in the customization stuff and in like custom of businesses, but like you can see all the costumes out here and how everyone is a unique individual. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to speak to that more. Like I think you are probably an Asheville native, a little more longer than me anyway.
So, on and off, yes,
Okay.
sort of.
Okay.
We moved here when I was 15
Okay.
from Washington, D.C., and I was like, we are going where? They're going to be rednecks. It's going to be, I had no concept of the South at all. And Asheville, of course, has exploded any of my expectations or understanding, and then continue to progress into being a city that's more, I guess you could say unique, but that has a culture that is more open and expressive than a typical North Carolina city, shall we say. And I've been to many of them, not all of them, but that's why we're often compared with Austin or these other cities that have creative technology, arts, culture, places where that drives a part of the economy, as well as many, many individuals participating. And I think Asheville's another one of those on a smaller scale, for sure.
What did you see with your experiences with Apple or with Google that could relate to some of the things that are maybe missing from our economy that could be opportunities for some of these unique personalities?
One thing I would say is that the structures of of many of those corporations and any kind of creative corporation, and they'll say this again and again and again, is this like running into people in the hallway, having a conversation that sparks an idea that someone else gets to take that and run with it. And you know, they do that by like putting you all in the same building, putting you in the same cafeteria, like having this kind of soup for you to get involved in, or, you know, but then also you can go and sit at your desk and get your work done. And Asheville has a lot of those ingredients, but not as much of the running into each other. We have a lot of individual opportunities, like, you know, just like hackathons or like other things that happen that maybe not everyone hears about. They just don't know it's happening. They find out about it later. They just don't, it's not very centralized. So I think we have a lot of those people on a much smaller scale who aren't running into each other, who don't realize that they could be working together on something, who don't necessarily like know how to make that kind of thing happen.
And co-working spaces, which are,
I was going to talk about
so,
Mojo.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a perfect, is exactly what we need to continue to be focusing on, because I do believe that density and that
and
serendipitous, like,
exactly.
and ideas make.
And even if you're not working at Mojo, they have these events, they have a 3D printer there, they have stuff that, you know, people can go there and hang out and do these things without, you know, have to go there to work.
Right. And one thing that I've noticed is how when the economy changes, it seems to be in large part because of technology, or technology has the ability to totally devastate and improve one section that had the technology and devastate another part of the population that doesn't. And so I would, my thoughts are a little bit on where do we go to take it so that the individuals that are experiencing these changes aren't as affected as much as sort of the money that's involved or the infrastructure that's involved. You know, like we're trying to do this on that level. Kate, maybe you could speak to that as far as what our future is looking like with the younger generation that's coming up and what they're going to be experiencing based on what we've just experienced in our, you know, sort of adult lives over the last 10 years, and how that's going to relate to our kids and, you know, the catch-up and the different things of that nature.
Yeah, well, I was thinking actually as Kora was talking about how we lack kind of an opportunity for the adult soup, how we really have a very large disconnect, I think, between the adult soup such as it is and our youth soup. Because the population that goes to schools, our school-age population, is really demographically very different than the adult population. So most, once you are out of high school in this community, there's the African American and community of color is very small, but 50% of our students in the Asheville City Schools are students of color. Also, 50% of the students in the Asheville City Schools are students living in poverty. Which is not true for our 20, 30, 40-year-old demographics. So it's really interesting that we have a concentration of poverty and cultural diversity in our schools that doesn't exist in the rest of our community, and I think it adds to the sense that we're not all kind of souping in the same way. I'm just going to keep going with that word.
No, I like that. No.
Right?
Excellent.
But so here we have this great opportunity to bring along our youth in the innovation that we're all talking about. But we have some real barriers to that understanding in that most of us who are 20, 30, 40 don't look like the kids we want to engage in being a part of this innovation. So I think that's one sort of trend and theme that we need to think about. I think that what we're trying to prepare kids for is a future that's completely unknowable to us. There's some estimates that 50% of the jobs that will exist in 20 years don't exist right now. We can't even prepare kids for jobs because we don't even know what the jobs will be. And so how do we create and engage these kids and our youth in just being a part of our conversations and keeping up with running as fast as we can to make them the kinds of adaptable, resilient, flexible problem solvers who are going to be able to swim into the world we don't even know about yet. A point again about the digital divide. In our community, about 50% of our children are living in homes with privilege, and they have access to lots of technology that is reliable and very open-ended and allows them to become creators and producers of of all kinds of art and information. And we have about 50% of our children who don't have access and can't actually participate in the conversations that are happening in the rest of our culture right now. So as an educator and as somebody who's concerned about where we're going in the future of Asheville, my question to all of us is, how are we going to bring along 50% of our youth to ensure that they can be part of our democracy, part of our future economy and our workforce, and not get really left behind? We're trying to do that in lots of different ways, and one of the ways that Heather and I first got connected was trying to bring more coding opportunities into the schools, both after school and during the school day. Something that we're still really needing to engage our tech community and helping us with more.
And it's been a recent conversation for the last 3 months because the one thing that I took away from Leadership Asheville, or at least my year in it, is the absolute importance of after school and summer out of school education in bridging that divide. And the great thing is, and we see this around the world, is Wi-Fi connection and a good question to pose to a kid can send them on an incredible discovery and the love of learning. So setting up that infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that brings me to the point of what I'm holding here in my hand. Is these are devices that are basically changing the world right now with a lot of the open source data and a lot of the open source designing, and how some of the sort of raw materials that are being used. This here is an Arduino. This is the Arduino Uno version, and it just is sort of a crucial piece in one of these elements that's like a bridge where you can connect and make things happen with robotics. You can build your own 3D printer. You can turn on your house, the lights at your house, control different things, and be able to have alarm systems and all of this stuff built from scratch. And it used to be all proprietary designs and patents. And these are not patented. These are open source designs. This one is the Arduino, and this is a microcontroller. These two here, this is the Raspberry Pi and the BeagleBone Black. These two are computers, and full-on computers right here the size of a credit card. And so this is something that's been designed in England by a open source community there that is a Raspberry Pi organization, and that's PI. And they designed this open source so you could have any of these built here locally at our own electronics manufacturers. But they're specifically designed for education to teach kids how to build these things from the board level up. And you've got all of the things. The biggest things on here are the stuff that you have to plug in to interact with the outside world with our big fingers and stuff like that. This is around $30, I think. You can have it delivered to your house, and the power is minimal on these things. I really see this and the BeagleBone Black here as being a part of the next wave of jobs, where when the last big wave that came through was networking and setting up networks and running Cat5 cable and setting up all of the workstations, and with all of these big computers that are running all of this electricity and creating heat essentially when they don't need to. And this here can replace any household computer and maybe even has more capabilities than what like NASA had on the spaceship when they went to the moon or something like that. And so these are light. This one here is around $45, and so the capabilities have changed dramatically. The ability to afford it has changed, and but when we've gotten tracked into these more consumer paradigms where the people that knew how to develop these things and the people that understood the code, like the kids that we're teaching the code, those people know how to set the paradigms up with free resources to create a paradigm that you have to buy into because of an agreement that you signed up with. And we want to inform people and make sure that they're very well aware that the same resources that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs had available to them to hire designers and developers to work with their stuff, that our kids can have the same opportunities. They just need to know how to look at things a little differently and decide what makes sense to buy and purchase as a consumer, and what makes sense to at least know what you're buying, and from a service that is really giving you some premium talent. So that is one of my main points, was to show you this technology and how kids are building cell phones, but it's the whole systems. Like we don't need all of this heavy copper and stuff in building homes. You can provide light with a lot less resources. You can provide a lot of the energy that a human needs, and even a family needs throughout the day, can be done just by thinking about it in a different way, but not necessarily just thinking solar panels or wind. That's generating energy. We need to be thinking much more about the efficiencies of our systems and the efficiency of the way we operate in our whole community, so that we're not finding ourselves hung over and needing to do something and realizing that, there's not even any jobs out there for these people after the party is over. And so that's kind of like my input outside of being the organizer moderator. And we'll definitely take questions. What did you have a question?
Well, I just have a question about, it seems like there's a lot of great access out there for people, except for, especially for you, probably can answer this a little bit better. We've lost a lot of the training of like hands-on in our schools. For me, I grew up with books and stuff, but shop was already gone. Anything that I want to learn, like if I want to learn that, I have to self-source, go online, watch videos, try to figure that stuff out. How can we transition to where kids are being taught by an individual? Because if I could learn that stuff growing up, I would probably be in the past of a computer
I've seen that quite a bit. I've definitely seen the sea change where all of the mentorship, all of the hands-on. I grew up in construction, and so it was always someone there telling you how to do things. And I've definitely seen that sea change happen where you've got to go into it. You've got to get the job. They're not going to have an entry-level job that they're going to train you for. That's also something that's very adding a lot. If you have something to add to that, anyone, don't let me hoard this.
Yeah, well, first I just want to say again, my name is Kate Pett, and I'm the director of the Asheville City Schools Foundation, and if any of you would like to come help make this happen, I welcome you to come talk to me. Okay. That's really our role, is to try and be a conduit for innovation in our public schools. So, love to talk with all of you about that more. I think you would be surprised actually to find out what the Asheville City Schools are trying to do to keep pace with this. At our middle school, we do have a coding club after school. We participated in the Hour of Code this year, and we have multiple different teachers who are really trying really hard now with Google Chrome to really try and use in a very daily, hands-on kind of way, technology to have kids, again, not just be consumers of information, but to try and learn how to be producers of information and controllers of information, and producers of art. This year there was a big push to have kids be doing lots of videography, PSA creation, really trying to take what was kind of old school language arts into the forward, you know. At the high school level, we do have a gaming lab where kids are learning how to create games. Kids are building small computer kind of boards. We have a makers class and a makers program after school. And that's not to say that's enough, because it's not. I mean, it's clearly not. But I think that that there are kind of places where we are trying to create that change. One of the real challenges is not only do we not know where the jobs are going to be, but to try and retrofit our classrooms to even keep up with this is incredibly, although Dallas keeps trying to help me understand how it can be less expensive, it feels very expensive when you're trying to work for 4,000 kids, and we have one of the smallest districts in the state. So when you think about how do we provide these opportunities, we think about how do we train teachers and how do we keep teachers up to speed. Huge challenge there. You know, teachers are like running as fast as they can to like cover massive amounts of content, and so how do we keep teachers being a part of this dialogue and keep them up to speed? Plus, how do we infuse our classrooms with opportunities to be hands-on in these ways with things that we really don't fundamentally know exactly where they're going. It's a huge challenge, and we really need the schools to interface more with change agents and with people who this is what they do and this is what they want to talk about. I want to echo what Heather said in terms of the out-of-school time opportunity. And I think when a lot of us kind of think about 20, 30 years ago, when we were thinking about how we all had mentors and craftspeople, and I don't know, I grew up in Detroit, I never had any of that anyway, so, but we didn't have that. We were, hanging out on street corners. But I think that when a lot of that happened anyway was after school or in the summers. And so again, how do we keep Asheville adults who are different both in culture and education and socioeconomic privilege connected to our kids? That's a real question, but one of the key opportunities is after school and in the summers. At Asheville Middle School, we have a program where all kinds of community service providers get together and provide after-school programming in a really flexible and creative way. And in that after-school program, we have a makers club, we have a coders club, but we need a lot more help with those things. And in the summer, there's really a challenge. There are not adequate opportunities for kids who don't have a lot of money to participate. There are some coding opportunities, but for the most part, if you are not a student with privilege, you really are getting left out of any kind of summer opportunity to continue to be creative and learn how to make these things. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. Over the last year, I was trying to create the Makerspace program here, Asheville Maker Space, and had a pretty successful run, but was able to see where that cutting edge between what the younger students that have access to this. Now, I had to purchase this myself. Back to your point about having to self-do it. You have to get it yourself. You have to be able to afford the raw materials to even go to keep learning more. But the professors at the highest level of universities in our country wouldn't have the time to be able to study, or maybe even the mental resources that the child that has come up where they're just native to this. Like, this is just, of course, like, I can use this for anything. I don't have to pay any licensing fees, or no one's going to come and sue me because I have this technology and I've changed it somehow. So I've thought about the university level, and I wanted to talk with Kora about that and have her speak. We're here at UNCA. They've been gracious enough to allow us to come and geek out this weekend, and we want to sort of have that atmosphere of how we can take this and use the strength that represents and the infrastructure that represents, and how to really sort of look at this on a more sophisticated level or in a more impactful level to really just start pouring resources out nonstop. Go.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about teaching at UNCA and kind of my philosophy about it, and then I want to kind of get back to Asheville jobs.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe we can just kind of round that off too. The self-sourcing that you mentioned, I think is incredibly key. Basically, if I have 16 kids come into my classroom and they're like, teach me how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and Flash, I can be like, great, lynda.com, here's your login, bye, right? I mean, the issue is not that the resources aren't available, and these are college kids. They can, even if they don't own a computer, they can go to the library and use a computer. They can figure that part out. I think it's another problem to teach students to teach themselves, and that is not going away. Like, that is the direction of education at all levels. So that's when I'm in a classroom, I'm like, I want you guys, if you guys get out of my class and you're like, how the hell did she make that reflective type thing again? Like, whatever it is that I like showed them how to do or had them do for a homework assignment, like, they should be like, I'm just gonna Google it. I'm just gonna figure it out. I'm just gonna go find this little video on YouTube, you know, where the guy shows me how to do it, you know? I mean, there are bigger challenges like access to the software when you're out of school. That's a whole other thing. But even that, a lot of those things have changed. Adobe has gone to a monthly fee for various things. Like, some of those things are becoming far more accessible. But that's, like, to me, my #1 goal is teaching students to teach themselves. Now, that's a lot harder than it sounds, right?
Yeah.
It's getting easier because you have, like, I have 3 nephews who are 12, 10, and 7. And they're like Minecraft, they're like whatever, they can figure out how to do whatever the hell they want to do. And even my oldest one is really trying to take it to the next level. He wants to learn how to code Minecraft, he wants to do like Tech Kids summer camp, he wants to do all this kind of stuff. But of course, he has access. He has a computer at home. He doesn't have his own computer, which he's really bitter about. But switching over to the jobs part of this thing. UNCA, at least, and I can't speak for AV Tech or Warren Wilson, but those are kind of, you know, obviously our main colleges in this area, don't have a direct pipeline, technology-wise, into our greater community. They don't have even, like I was saying before about disparate groups, it's not like the new media department is like all hooked into, you know, like everything and it helps network students. Like that doesn't happen here either, which I think is something that could be worked on. But that networking thing in general, I think, is for Asheville jobs and for technology field here is probably the biggest challenge. The way that the Chamber of Commerce supports various arenas of jobs, like right now, they have a 5x5 plan. There are 5 different industries that they concentrate on for jobs, and it's like health and arts and crafts and some other manufacturing.
Yeah,
like basically, they're trying to hit segments of the population that doesn't try and, you know, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to like be, you know, just beer makers or whatever, you know, the specialty is of that town, and have every single person work in that industry or whatever it is.
Or everybody's a musician.
Right, exactly. You know, and we were talking about this a little bit on a conference call earlier about the kind of a job life cycle, and how you have to have entry-level jobs for, you know, people who are in high school in the summer. Like, they need a job in the summer. Like, that's why we have lifeguards. That's what's up. And Asheville has grown a little stagnant in that service industry, where those people who want to move out of the service industry, who are kind of aged out of it, who are interested in doing something else, that piece of the job market is missing, right? You can be a doctor in this town, you can be a lawyer, you can be anything that you went to college for higher learning for. And technology is a really unique field in that one person can do tons of stuff. They can start an entire company, they can be one-person company, which is not, you know, it's not true in medicine. It's not true in other fields. Like, there's an infrastructure, there's, you know, you have to be able to access people, or there's laws that you have to play into and everything like that, which I think is something that both culturally and just our logistics here really would suit Asheville. So I don't necessarily have a solution for like how that can all gel and come together, but I definitely think there's huge opportunity.
Yeah, it seems ideal as far as temperature and
Right.
Well,
Servers can see really cool.
Good for humans.
And there is something pretty exciting about that, the newer industry of technology in that regard, that it is one. It is two people and a computer that can impact change, and that can be very empowering with mentorship. And it's hard for me not to go back to that education piece, but I'll go forward with jobs. There's a couple points that were made that I think should resonate with everyone, which is one being, we don't have no idea what the jobs of the future. It is fun. It's fun to daydream. It's fun to brainstorm with a good group of people and be like, all right, in 3 years is this, or did you see, the SpaceX, the new ship that's going to be going out into space and what that means, and the fact that it's going to be open source. And so one mind taking old data or new release data or patent world is now completely changed is going to be very exciting in that regard for the next 5-10 years. In Asheville, I think that the density that is what we need to focus on. If we can bring, and we talked a little bit about some successful cities when it comes to technology and future jobs. And while you might think, it's San Francisco, who does not want to live there, or Austin, and you have all this thing, what they really have focused on is cross multiple industries all being able to work together. And of course, urban centers tend to do that. And Dallas knows this very much about me. I think that we're products of our environment, so encouraging us doing our basics as a community, which is infill and equality, will give us a better chance of being able to react properly when new technology, new industries will come in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So education basics.
Well, I can't say enough about open source stuff, and that goes even to automobiles. They're in information, where we're studying the data sets from another case study. That's an open information. They don't have to give you that information from that case study. There's things called local motors, and they're taking open source automobile designs and the mechanic community and just the design community in general from automobiles, and creating open source design that you can build all of the whole car from scratch there locally with your resources. There's a lot of opportunities here in Western North Carolina, in particular in our infrastructure with our energy. The grid is old. It basically, I think that's what Progress got caught in their market. Basically, they got caught in a situation where they couldn't afford to keep up with their infrastructure. We've got rusty transformers, and that's electricity. We use about 2.5 billion watts here. That's 2,500 megawatts. And we can replace that energy as far as the electricity goes with a lot of our paper products and a lot of the recyclable combustibles that are going into our landfills, and we can burn that in a cleaner way, and even stop a lot of the issues that are knocking at our door right now with the things like fracking and other situations. We only use about 8% of the state's energy at large here in Western North Carolina, and so it's not a lot, and that's a lot of the reason too that we don't get the investment back into our area, is that we're just not a large enough percentage of the needs to really be that concerned about. But we are definitely concerned about it because we're here. But I think we've taken an approach with solar and the popular trends that we see with some of the cooler aspects of making energy. And we've missed a lot of opportunities to really affect change on a grand scale here. And these opportunities do exist. It really is just about like putting the right configuration of things and being able to have the right people hear what we're saying here today to come back and try to turn back over into that and say, oh, well, what were you guys talking about, or we'd like to pick up on this, or let's put some investment over here or over there to start changing the story a little bit.
Well, and UNCA is in such a fantastic position to take advantage and to move that forward with their environmental studies department, and they just got a $1 million grant. And I think that in conjunction with a community that's like really interested in, you know, maybe things like piezoelectric wind energy, where you just put the unit on the side of your house and you're done, like just leapfrogging over all those infrastructure issues. And
we've got that opportunity.
Right, and we have a really just an interested populace that's willing to pay the money. I mean, when Solarize Asheville is not free, and people are like lined up, you know, I mean, it's obviously discounted, but like people want that in this community. We have a university that's really onto that, and having a technology community that can support that kind of thing and environmental technology is, I think, kind of a little bit of a missing piece that could really bring that together.
And having that on a utility scale.
Well, and I think that when we define utility scale now, it's going to look a lot different than goodness in 3 years. So when you're talking, you know, the cost of infrastructure and copper, you know, cleaner coal. So, but it's, you know, it's not going to be built until 2045. Do we really want to talk about what the world's going to look like in 2045 when we're finally at a new state of, you know, technology? What I'm excited about is the stuff that can stick on the side of your house. Right. This very, you know, technology is getting smaller and smaller. Where we get our electricity, how we're linked together as a community.
Because and a lot of people don't understand that solar is not.
No.
Solar just feeds back into the same grid. It just feeds back into the same infrastructure, and that's why you can turn the lights on in your house at night.
And if you if you just have solar up there and you've paid that money and you're not, you're still running old light bulbs or an old, you know, inefficient oven, and you're trying to make electricity on top of your house, and you've got an electric stove that's outdated, you're behind the 8 ball. And there's things like that I think our entire system and our entire structure could look at some of these things if with communication.
And I think there's a great opportunity here to that point about how do we connect education to jobs to help kind of foment all of this. You know, there are efforts at different places. There have been, you know, I think of Go, Green Opportunities, where there's been a real effort to try and reach into our community and engage disenfranchised parts of our population in really kind of leapfrogging the need for kind of going a traditional route of education and jumping right into how can they actually participate in the new economy by being trained for green jobs. And that's met with you know, kind of some success, but it hasn't really found the traction that it needs. Whether because when industry is coming in, it's already bringing its own people with it, it's bringing its own experts. And so how do we as a community really take hold of the opportunities that are coming and ensure that those jobs and opportunities are being available to people in our own community by ensuring that there's training and internships, things like that that will help our community, what Asheville really is, be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's if we could mention a couple of more of our community partners, or you know, the people that are out there that are doing some of this innovative stuff. I know there's Carolina Day School, who has just hired Ian Riddell as their STEM guy, and you mentioned him with the Tech Kids summer camps. He's Tech Kid. That's tek-kids.org, I believe, or .com. But he's here, and we've got the Code for Asheville is another very interesting group that's really engaging the community here and pushing out a lot of this information so that you can have access to all of this public data that's just there, and then try to make it so
and I have to say, the city of Asheville has been an absolute, all my political battles in the last has been amazing. Transparency and understanding the future of technology. We're very lucky to have, just going to throw it out, the CIO, Jonathan Feldman. He has written books on transparency. He's respected globally on it. And we have a lot of talent in this town. And you put a magnifying glass to it, there's innovative thinkers that are on the forefront of trying to do the right thing. So
absolutely, and we want to just sort of keep pushing out really good vibes and pushing away from the tension that exists, so that when we say we've got a wonderful city council and we've got a wonderful city infrastructure, their city managers and all those people are great, that we're not, and we have wonderful county commissioners and wonderful county infrastructure too. We don't want to find ourselves at odds with one or the other by saying, well, we think that all of these folks are kind of great. We want to keep moving forward and make everything greater.
That's fair. That's fair.
And it's,
but when you say county infrastructure, I'm like, I think the commissioners also too would say.
well, but compared now, the county schools here.
Oh yeah, not schools.
How many do they have? Like, you have about 16 in the Asheville district.
In the whole of Asheville City Schools is only 4,000 students, and Buncombe County Schools is closer to 30,000 students.
Right, and there's like 42 buildings, I think, 42 schools in the county system.
Yeah.
Versus
and they're
16
after
buildings.
school, and yeah, it's.
Yeah, there's
It's-
probably like, yeah.
And so we're talking about even a larger scale, and
Yeah.
it can even be a much bigger impact if when we start to push those things back, that'll even spill over into the well-being of everything around us, keeping everything positive and healthy and growing in the right direction. So are there any questions from the audience? Yes, Mr. McKenzie. Happy birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday.
I appreciate it. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I keep hearing that Asheville is a technological upcoming city. Maybe we already are. Maybe we will be in the future. Are your thoughts on this? Do we need? Is it going to be ground up with the children and schools, or do we need like a big hub to come here, like a Google or something, to kind of really attract the tech community that we've been hearing is out there for? Or is it both or neither?
Well, that's what actually sparked this
Yeah.
conversation was the discussion with the Google creative team at MoogFest when they spoke there, and they said that UNCA, like they typically work with universities, and UNCA would be the best way forward to create that type of thing. Now, in my personal opinion, obviously, I'm a middle-aged guy. I'd like for it to start everywhere, across the board, as quick as possible.
I'd love to speak just briefly about our current state of our tech community here, because we got a lot of press during MoFest, and you'll hear Silicon Mountain a lot, which is I don't actually sit. It doesn't sit comfortably with
Might
me.
just be a hashtag.
Yeah, it's like change the world by a hashtag thing is not the way to do it. So. We are attracting tech community, but the tech community is not the world of thespians. They are sitting in their home, or if we were lucky enough to get them to a co-working space, and they're coming in from everywhere because of our quality of life. Now, right now, just as what's the next best thing to do is how do you engage them in the community for the greater good? How do you get them as mentors with the kids? How do you start creating this empathy? How do you actually say all these hidden people in the corner that are part of our community?
Introverted.
Yeah, can naturally, part of the industry, be introverted. And how do we put them in front of the EDC, the Economic Development Coalition, and be like, no, it's not 100 jobs, but this one person can create that starter glue job, and how do we encourage that? How do we encourage the 4 people? And I actually want to mention the AB Tech Incubator Program. Even though it is an UNCA Candler, and they would say, I know it's an UNCA Candler, it's not just food and manufacturing, and they have taken in a 3D printing company, a server hosting company, and when it comes to incubation, I always believe it's grassroots. So in that sort of middle level of AB Tech, I've been happy to see what they have been trying to do with their lack of resources. I don't believe personally that we need to attract a Google Fiber. And we have fiber underground. I feel like I should introduce myself always and say, hi, my name is Heather Seltzer. Do you know that we already have the infrastructure? Go talk to the ERC. We have fiber under our ground. We, just on the infrastructure level, can compete with any place in the world. It's the receivers on the end that are missing. And it's the demand for that speed. There's very few people who need it. So the good news is we can be there. We just don't have anyone making that demand. I don't think we need to be even an Austin in that regard to be a successful city. And I think the first thing I said in that conference call is what we have to focus on is the basics. It's the only way that you'll get people involved in the community so they're mentors and being adaptable to change. And it's the only way to attract more people who will be part of that. And that is the stuff that's dirty and people don't often want to think about, which is equality and healthcare and infrastructure and roads and just the very basics where suddenly the person can stop thinking about how are they going to feed their kid, and they can start thinking about, maybe I need to get out to the polls and vote. And that's actually, if I could take away anything, if you really want a strong tech community.
Well, and something I
And
forgot
not
to
Silicon Mountain, but yeah, Silicon Asheville. And that's really what we need to be focused on.
Yeah, okay, we need to spend more time together. And, you know, there isn't actually a model. Austin doesn't have it. Silicon Valley doesn't have it. There isn't a model in this country where there is a community that is actually bringing along the whole community in this. All of the other communities that are on the tech edge are leaving behind huge parts of their population. And so Asheville has a real opportunity because our scale is doable. 4,000 children is a doable number of people for this community to own and accelerate. That's completely within our capacity. And in this way, Asheville can be an innovator in a brand new way, which is that we create a tech forward that really includes everyone.
That's a human
Thank
element.
you. That's what
Keeps the human
that's
element.
nice to hear.
Yeah.
That we don't need to be Silicon Valley.
No,
And I think Asheville can bring something that is incredibly rich
Yeah,
to the community.
and so I feel concerned about, because I think that model of a huge, you know, of more tech, big, coming in from outside gets us more of what we have, which is a slice of the community that doesn't really know this community necessarily, that isn't totally invested in this community, that doesn't feel rooted to ensuring that this is a real participatory kind of development of our community. So I advocate for a grassroots up. I think we can do it, and I think it can look like Asheville, and we can actually be a model for the rest of the country in terms of how do we really make this be a leapfrog where we take people from poverty and children of poverty and we help them move forward without having to drag them through our industrial revolution.
Yes.
Well, and
Thank
that
you. The model
brings me to
city
this.
is why
Yeah.
I'm in Nashville too.
That I forgot to mention, last year I was a part of a thing where we did the historical marker for Jimmy Rogers on Haywood Street, right in front of the Woolworth building. But during that research, I was asked by the state to do the research to get all of the stuff together for that marker so that we could have that. And I work with a lot of musicians and try to be an advocate to show the economic force that the individual musicians represent here. And through my research, I was able to, the beginnings of the AM radio station here at the Flatiron Building, and how that was one of the that was the single most influential radio station in the Western world in the 20s, when radio was as big as the internet is now. And it represented us being at the pinnacle of the technology for that moment and that time, and what that represented to the rest of the world, and the impact and the influence that we were able to command then. And it even defines our modern day when we look back at these old buildings and the bluegrass music and the culture that we want to preserve. It's all, like, a lot of it is kind of, that's like a marker right there around the 1926. From there, recording went on to happen, and recording records in the record industry, and then broadcasting and television. And we didn't pick up on those trends of technology, and it left our entire economy suffering. And we've kind of been trying to catch up, and we've caught up to it in a tourist aspect, and in a sense of, like, we have something where people want to be. People want to retire here from around the world, but we have the opportunity with the internet and with the open source resources to really get back on top of this thing, to be a server capital where the natural temperatures that we already have are making it so that we're saving our energy, so that we don't have to have crazy amount of heat or a crazy amount of air conditioning like the rest of the world does. we should not have such a sense of scarcity that we experience here compared to the resources and the minds and the mental capacity that we all share and the people that we can connect to here. And so maybe you could speak to what the UNCA and the media thing has in entertainment, because we are here at somewhat of an entertainment thing. I'm thinking about entertainment jobs, that type of stuff.
There's
Did I
definitely
throw
in
you
the-
off too
No,
much?
no, I'm
Broadcasting and
prepared.
entertainment jobs. Okay, that,
I don't know so much
think
about
fits.
broadcasting, which is ironic
Just-
since I work for
yeah.
an internet TV startup. But but UNCA does a ton of like 3D animation, and I can tell you, so many of the students in the new media department are really interested in gaming and game design and all of this kind of things, which I think is really interesting because we don't have any of that here. And those students are going to graduate and they're going to have to move somewhere else, because there's nothing here for them to be an animator. There's nothing here for them to get designing games or coding games, like doing anything on any level. And I think that one of the things, like talking about like Google coming here or something like that, and them saying that they work with universities, it's a little bit of a misnomer. Like, they work with like NYU's ITP. Like, they work with a university that has created a special program like MIT's Media Lab that is like, they got 3 or 4 like super influential professors to come to a place. They pay them a bunch of money, and then those people like are like super magnets, and they get like the smartest people from wherever to like come study with them. And it's just an explosion of entrepreneurial activity and creativity, and they do all this stuff. Maybe they stay in that location, maybe they don't. I think it's obviously like New York and Boston, a lot of those people stay there and start companies and create startups and like do all that kind of thing, which I don't actually think is a bad thing I think it's something that could be done in Asheville, could be done at UNCA to basically create a much smaller version of that.
And maintaining our values.
That doesn't have to have anything to do with Google.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it
Keep independence. Back to the
yeah,
independence.
you know what I mean? Like, it may attract Google to say, why don't we make a little office here, because they've got these people that we can hire, we can work with, that we could do this kind of thing. And I know
they'll buy an Android app from you. If you make an app, they'll buy it from you.
And I know that during MoFest there was like talk about just like how to make things happen here and how to do that kind of thing. And I think that would be one way to plant a seed of that kind of thing to attract students, which I think are great. They don't take jobs. They're not going to steal jobs away from you.
And mid-level
They pay to like
startups.
live. Yeah, I mean, there's just there's a lot of advantages to doing something highly specialized like that, which is what we do in the environmental studies department here at UNCA. It's very high level. It's not just a general environmental. Like it's the real deal. So
We have 5 more minutes. Are there any more questions from the audience?
I wanted to make just a quick connection to what's happening.
One more, or like we'll bounce in and we'll close out. No, you're fine.
Okay, good. So I'll just make a quick political connection, which is that, a lot of the things that we've talked about here, incubation, K-12, community college level, UNCA, that all of these things right now are really being, in many ways, if not undone, really turned back by our General Assembly. I mean, I think that this whole conversation about the future of Asheville has to come inside of a context about what's happening at statewide and what's happening to North Carolina in terms of the national perception of our state. And so I think none of this conversation about technology can happen outside of our current political environment, which just demands that we participate as we think about a future Asheville and a future North Carolina. We have just got to have these tech voices rise to the top of what's happening politically, because the drain of resources away from any of these systems that we're talking about that would create a pipeline to help prepare our community for the future are really being attacked and depleted and need our engagement.
well, and it's also that perception. Like, why would Google want to come to North Carolina
Exactly.
if we're going to be like a bunch of jerks who don't want to play with them?
Yeah.
Very
Well,
much.
Yeah,
You know?
and I'll just speak, to the whole like Common Core, issue, that we're starting to band it, whether or not you're familiar with this, national movement to having a common curriculum throughout our country, and that now North Carolina is going to sit that out while the rest of the country moves forward with a common dialogue, says something to a place like Google about whether or not you can come and expect to have kids who are going to be able to talk and float.
Well, and even just a state that's like not even willing to like try it. Like, hello, just try it. If it doesn't work, then you do something else. Like, it's not that hard.
Yeah, and so look out for the next Code for Asheville hackathon. I'm sure that'll be.
And actually, we were talking about making it for kids just a 4-hour because we don't want to put them through a 12-hour.
And there is a little bit of a learning curve, but they take all kinds.
Well, and we have some great resources. But I just to sort of follow through and thank you so much for letting us come and talk to you guys today. Is that I believe that if we wanted to focus on making and being positive as we walk in here and having that very pragmatic, what's your next best step for either you or the community when it comes to the future of jobs, it is to recognize that we need to take care of the basics. And that Asheville is, and I love this about the city, is the perfect size and has this perfect amount of energy and activism that you can make a difference. So the future can be very dismal if you look at the grand scheme of the world. It can be very exciting, but there's all the things in between.
You can always mow your own lawn.
You can always mow your own lawn. You can always grow something. But Asheville can actually be very, very inspiring. And 1 or 2 connections can make an impact in 20 people's lives. So if you guys are here local, whatever you're into, do it all the way, is what I would love to say to you.
Absolutely, and at that we are like down to the last set.
Well, please.
And Cora gets to.
No, she gets more
Gets to
than that.
close. No, she's gonna get to close it out.
Take more questions.
Oh, were you gonna close it out? So I'm not gonna close it out. You're gonna close it out.
Fly from New York? Sorry.
No, you don't have to. I can.
Yeah, no.
Go
I
ahead.
like voting. I like that one, and I like if you want to contact like the EDC and be like, hey, what's up? What's going on with our jobs thing? But also just like be participatory and informed. I hear a lot of people what is the city doing for jobs? I'm like, I don't know. Read the paper. Like, you know what I mean? Like.
And don't
This
have
isn't
it
an issue. This isn't an issue like you shouldn't necessarily have to come and like listen to other people tell you their opinion on. Like, you can find out what you think.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around and listening, and hope to go out and change the world from here, and we will certainly do our part to keep on. And find Asheville City Schools Foundation. They've got the In Real Life after school program that they need participants in and want as much help as they can. And I'm going to not wear out my welcome, and we're going to close out the Future of Asheville promptly at 12:02. Thank you.